the sideboard. Now his mix is a little bit exotic. Instead of just overloading on Reapers, he has access to Gore Clan Rampager, something that a lot of these red-green decks have skipped on for the Reaper.
Yeah, definitely you see Rampager a lot in the green-red build of the list because it's a little bit more aggressive and there's only so many cards to choose from when you're 2 colors. But the 3-color list, you don't see it nearly as often.
Now, he does have Xenagos, God of Revels, like we talked about. Another card he does have is Scavenging Ooze. It's a card that most of the red-green decks have, but a lot of the Jund decks have cut to make room for that black removal.
So a turn 1 untapped Stomping Ground and Elvish Mystic for Jeremy. David was on the play with a Temple. And Astel at the play and a cross for 2 more. Very solid opening by David. Jeremy draws, plays a Mountain, and has Courser of Krufix.
Quite the powerful turn 2 play. I mean, this guy not only threatens to block David's Ash Zealot if it comes to that, which he probably won't just because of the potential for burn, but the extra life gain is actually just huge, as well as the extra card flow. And this card just seems like a nightmare for red.
Oh,
if
yeah.
he doesn't have Chain to the Rocks.
Mizium Mortars is not in his main deck. So yeah, this is a challenging card to answer.
I've been noticing a lot of these mono red or barely Boros decks, not using Mizium Mortars anywhere. What do you think about that?
I played it in my list, but I do not consider it to be a requirement as you see Chandra's Phoenix come across. I like playing a main deck where it's basically a creature removal deck. I don't really like Boros Charm that much game 1. But I like setting in as part of a conversion plan where you just become a burn deck against decks where your creature removal is bad. So we'll see what Jeremy adds to the board. Plays an Overgrown Tomb tapped and adds Domri.
Yeah, you were talking about this earlier, how the prevalence of 3-color decks is making it more palatable to play a red aggressive deck. Who do you think has the edge here?
Oh, I think I would rather be on the red-white burn side of this matchup.
Interesting. Now, is it correct? Did we just see a missed life gain trigger from the Courser?
If our life totals are showing are correct, then that is the case.
It's real easy to forget that the Courser is not just an Oracle of Moldiah.
So Ash Zealot coming across. And Domri is taken out as a result. You see a hand loaded with a lot of action here. Boros Charm appears multiple copies of Searing Blood. And Searing Blood takes down the Elvish Mystic. And Searing Blood is a huge addition for this archetype.
Oh, yeah.
As we see Chandra Phoenix get return to the hand as well.
Yeah, what do you think about killing the Chandra's Phoenix with your Domre instead of the Ash Zealot? Because, I mean, the Phoenix can come back.
Sure, the red-green red-green deck is a little soft in the air, so I understand the instinct, but yeah, certainly if the game's going to go on for a long time, I generally err on the side of killing everything but the Phoenix.
That is some disturbing artwork.
Oh yeah, no, it is rough. As you see, Elvish Mystic and Sylvan Caryatid enter play for Jeremy here, gumming up the ground. And decides to say, no, I'm going to hold back on D.
Classic alt use.
Magma Jet the draw for David.
Chandra's Phoenix looks like it's returning to the party.
Yep. We'll see if David wants to use his other Searing Blood here. Take care of the Elvish Mystic perhaps, or just sit back. I do like pitting this deck on mana, and you're going to see it here, another Searing Blood taking out Elvish Mystic.
Yeah, he just wants to try to slow down Jeremy's ability to put out some big monsters, you know?
Yeah. And this is the kind of the red-white burn plan you're seeing is he's not necessarily going to be able to overpower him, and Jeremy has played some pretty powerful cards and has more additional cards in his hand, but just not giving them enough time to deploy everything. And fighting them on an axis that they're not really prepared to fight you on.
So Jeremy might not realize it, but he is already facing down pretty close to lethal. I mean, that Phoenix is threatening to knock him to 5, the Boros Charm knocking him to 1.
And Magma Jet is the last card in hand.
Yeah, so unless Jeremy, I mean, now Jeremy can buy himself a little bit of time by killing that Phoenix again, but it's only it's only a little bit of time since David will be threatening lethal again next turn.
Yeah.
And if he gets that Phoenix hit in, he'll have the burn alone to finish the job.
So David untaps and draws. The draw is another copy of Chandra's Phoenix. Phoenix comes down and knocks Jeremy down to 6.
And he did gain the life that turn. So now the only way he lives through this is if he simultaneously deals with the Phoenix and gains the life from the Corsair. He gains the life going to 7, but he still needs an answer to the Phoenix.
Oh. So doing some shenanigans here, playing a card with off the top with Corsair that reveals a creature which you can then get with Dalmarie, but it doesn't appear that any of this is providing a long-term solution to what's going on.
Shenanigans have been called by the Red Mage Extraordinaire.
He's doing some fidgety stuff, but David's just going to kill him. This is what I love.
There's no question.
He's generating card advantage and looking at the top card of his deck and doing manipulative things, and David will just kill him. I really like it.
I can't help but notice we have been looking at an awful lot of red matches today. Is red just dominating standard that much?
As you see, yeah, the writing's on the wall here after the Boros Charm. The 2 Phoenixes are lethal. Like I said, I wrote about this in the article that I wrote this week. I feel like the metagame's kind of hit a tipping point of people are kind of messing around with too many comes into play tap lands and too many additional colors, and really aggressive strategies could be prone for a comeback. And you see David take game 1, and kind of exactly the way that I described it. It wasn't that Jeremy stumbled or was missing colors or whatever.
No.
He was just a little slow out of the gates, played a couple, comes into play tap lands and all that sort of stuff. And David was just a little bit more efficient with what he was doing with his resources.
Now, David's going to have, he doesn't have a ton in his sideboard for this matchup since his main deck is already pretty well configured. What he does gain is Stormbreath Dragon and Mutavault to help have enough mana to actually cast the Stormbreath Dragon.
Yeah, I also really like Boros Reckoner in the sideboard. He has 2 copies. It's a little bit worse here than it is against green-red monsters, as they have some removal. But a lot of these decks are playing Ultimate Price as their additional sideboarded card, which also doesn't touch Boros Reckoner. And it clogging up the ground, and it's not even just about trading with big stuff. You think about Boros Reckoner being able to trade up all the time. It actually can be a lot more powerful than that in this matchup, because if Jeremy attacks with Palakranos into a Boros Reckoner, let's say, David will often go, all right, I'll block and redirect all the damage to you. It's that kind of game plan. And so Reckoner is really good against decks that are trying to attack on the ground that aren't flush with that much non-damage based removal. And Jund monsters and green-red monsters definitely qualify as those kind of decks.
Now, Jeremy has a little bit unorthodox balance of removal in his sideboard. Instead of going the Doomblade Ultimate Price route like a lot of people, he has 2 Putrefy, 2 Abrupt Decay, and 2 more Dreadbore. So he has access to a ton of hard removal. The question is, how much is he actually going to bring in? My guess is he doesn't want the Abrupt Decays unless he is targeting the Chain to the Rocks. I mean, they do hit Ash Zealot and buy him some time, but and maybe that's just enough, maybe that's enough. Dreadbore or Putrefy, though, can actually hit the Stormbreath Dragon.
Yeah, the cause of concern I would just have here, if you're David, is he has a lot of cards that aren't really that well suited to this matchup. Ash Zealot, especially when he's on the draw, Jeremy is flush with really good blockers, Sylvan Caryatid, Corsair Crewfix, and then up the chain. And he also has Shock and Searing Blood that are not really that flush with targets. We saw Searing Blood be really good that game because Jeremy drew 2 copies of Elvish Mystic to match the 2 copies of Searing Blood that David drew. But these removal spells are pretty hard to use on the balance. It's basically Elvish Mystic, occasionally Scavenging Ooze, or you're trying to use multiple spells to cobble together as a removal spell. And so he has a lot of cards that, were I in his seat, I would ideally like to remove from the deck, but it's not clear he has enough sideboard slots to really piece everything together.
Well, each player going through the motions, little classic daddy long shuffles.
Well, both players have a lot of, you were mentioning Jeremy has a plethora of different routes you can take with the way that he sideboards, because he has this weird mishmash of removal. There's a lot of cards that he could bring in all his copies of, or no copies at all. I'll tell you another card that I really like in this matchup is Rakdos Return. If I was Jeremy, especially on the play, I would want to get to that card, because just accelerating into a medium to large size Rakdos return is a really good game plan. I mean, it knocks
Like
out
even
their
just the
whole-
Rakdos return for 3.
Yeah, David needs kind of all the pieces of the puzzle to be able to win the match, especially when he has to use some of his resources killing creatures, because Jeremy is probably faster in a pure goldfish if he has mana acceleration. So I'm curious to see if Jeremy brings it in. It's not necessarily the most intuitive card to bring in because you think about it for control matchups primarily, but I think it has a lot of legs here as well. And Jeremy starts off with a basic forest and an Elvish Mystic.
It looks like that's an Anger of the Gods. Is this a sign that David sideboarded out his Ash Zealots to go, just straight up control and then win with the burn long term?
I think that's a reasonable plan here, in part because Ash Zealot's just so bad against Jund monsters. They have too many good blockers.
And Anger can actually kill those Sylvan Caryatids.
Yep. And you can see Jeremy has an Overgrown Tomb, and it looks like it's really painting him to potentially play this untapped, and I don't blame him because all your life matters here.
Yep, but if he does have a Courser of Kruphix, that's a pretty big game.
And he has Courser. Shows Stomping Ground on the top. Hand of the Gods is a curious one to bring in. It's definitely a high variance card. There's some draws where it's not going to do very much, and some draws where it's going to just cripple Jeremy. Let me see, Magma Jet here for the Elvish Mystic. And because he has Anger of the Gods in hand, I have to imagine this implies that he's more interested in scrying right now than necessarily killing the elf.
Yeah, it might just be that he wants a little bit of tempo. He wants to try to not fall behind here, make sure that his Anger gets him the value he wants.
So Dreadbore on the top of Jeremy's deck. Stomping Ground comes into play, tapped, gaining Jeremy a life off the Courser. And Sylvan Caryatid for Jeremy.
One thing David's got to do is figure out how to get rid of that Courser. Because if he just sits here 1-for-1ing, the Courser's going to draw some extra cards, gain some extra life, put some pressure on David.
And this sort of setup where you're turning into a real removal-based strategy is the reason that I like Stormbreath Dragon a lot in this deck as well. It fits very naturally into kill your guy, kill your guy, kill your guy. Now we try to win the game with Stormbreath.
Now, is there any chance that we're going to see Assemble the Legion out of David?
I think it's a big risk to be bringing in against Jund monsters because they already might be bringing in Golgari Charm to fight you over your Chain to the Rocks, and Golgari Charm is so excellent against Assemble the Legion. As you see Stormbreath Dragon here enter play for Jeremy.
Jund monsters demonstrating the strength of a bunch of 4 and 5 toughness creatures against some puny little red strategy.
Oh yeah, no, this is where the big stuff counts.
But as we've seen so far today, just because these red-white players might be temporarily behind doesn't mean they can't assemble a flurry of burn.
Yeah, and this is a place where Courser is so valuable too. All the extra life points, just so critical in giving Jeremy the time he needs to deploy his threads.
Now, War Leader's Helix, kind of a nice move on the Courser, being able to actually, it can't hit the Stormbreath Dragon, unfortunately. But it is a reasonable answer to Courser, letting you trade 1 card and gain enough life to offset the Stormbreath damage.
It's just very hard to win the game this way because eventually David runs out of resources making these sort of plays. And the top of Jeremy's deck is so much more powerful than the top of David's, assuming Jeremy's at a pretty comfortable life total.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not sure how David's going to actually be able to do enough damage without a Stormbreath Dragon.
Right. So Stormbreath Dragon comes across.
And he comes across as a nice guy.
And Scavenging Ooze the play for Jeremy.
Devastating. Yet another form of life gain and a threat that can grow large enough to not be hit by most of David's spot removal.
And with 2 green up and 2 creatures in Jeremy's
3
graveyard,
green, even counting the Sylvan Caryatid.
yeah, it's outside of the range of the Anger of the Gods in David's hand as well.
Yep.
We'll see how David tries to cobble together enough removal to keep his head above water as he starts off with the Temple of Triumph.
5 mana, plenty of cards in hand. I mean, he's got a lot of options available to him, but he is falling further and further behind as now he's looking at an opponent who effectively has 20 life and 2 large, serious threats.
Yep.
I mean, he's what, just 1 mana away from the Stormbreath Dragon getting real busy?
This game is more of a case study of recurring sources of damage versus one-shots. Why is Wild Nacatl better than Lava Spike? We're kind of getting a demonstration here.
David using his War Leader's Helix at the right time in order to be able to hit the Scavenging Ooze.
Jeremy takes a draw. It is, I believe, Golgari Charm.
Take the draw. So not a lot more for Jeremy. He has Golgari Charm, Dreadbore, and an Elvish Mystic. But one thing he does have is the ability to Monstrous Stormbreath Dragon if he draws a land, and the ability to Golgari Charm to regenerate his dragon if anything goes south.
And you can see David's hand right now flush with shocks, and so this regeneration might be coming up this turn. Anger of the Gods to start the turn from David. And there's a shock.
So he does not try to save it with the Golgari Charm.
It's possible it's some other green-black.
Could also be he correctly reads David for the second shock.
Sure. And now Palakranos off the top for Jeremy.
Wow, the beats continue. And Golgari Charm to potentially remove a Chain to the Rocks if it comes to that.
And Jeremy had a very, very comfortable life total. You see Lightning Strike and Searing Blood take down Palakranos.
Searing Blood's so good for helping fatties if you're stuck. Like, you don't want to be in the spot of having to kill fatties with the little 2 and 3 points of damage at a time. But if you have to be,
yep.
Searing Blood is a better second burn spell to the party than most.
And there's an Elvish Mystic for Jeremy.
Which he wisely saved so that he didn't get just walked into the anger of the gods.
Oh, that was the card. It was a Rorik Thar, which is devastating against
He is
red-white burn strategy.
extremely unbowed.
Yeah.
This is like literally Reed Duke. Getting up out of the ground, being unbowed, just coming across the table.
And it's really, really, really hard to beat this card. In my experience
Wait,
playing
did he
red-white
just
burn.
take 6 from the...
I believe he may be responding.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Searing Blood on the Elvish Mystic, a shock to the head, I would assume, but this is going to be tough.
So it's Chained to the Rocks or no at this point, right?
Basically, yeah. Possibly Stormbreath Dragon gives him some backdoor chance, but...
he packs it in.
Just packs it up.
Yeah, we're going to go to game 3. Exciting stuff, Jeremy, continuing the beats, the recurring sources of damage. And it's funny because even though it looked like kind of a blowout at the end there, Jeremy was actually much lower than it appeared. If his life total would have been a little bit lower, more burn could have gone to his face. David could have had some outs.
Yeah, and you're seeing, it looks like David's making kind of a full swap with the way that he's addressing the matchup on the play on the draw. You can see the Ash Eldar out of the deck. He removed Boros Charm from his deck while he's on the draw, and it looks like he's moving to bring Boros Charm back in. So maybe on the draw, he's trying to be more of a defense-oriented control deck, and on the play trying to become just a full-fledged burn deck.
Yeah, plus, I mean, you don't know for sure what breed of Red Green or Red Green X you're up against. The way that game went, it's clear Jeremy did not have a ton of removal, and Jeremy did have lots of fatties, including Rorik Thar.
And that's another incentive to sort of speed the game up a little bit, because Rorik, you can't play a control game the whole way through when Rorik Thar looms, because that blows up all of your sequencing.
Definitely.
I've lost to that card plenty. Plenty. Game 3 about to get started here between Red White Burn and Jund Monsters.
Yeah, Rorik Thar has consistently stripped one of my dissolves out of my hand.
Yeah.
Like it's...
It can be good supplemented by other cards against a deck like Esper Blue White, but it certainly can't be a standalone plan, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, Rorik Thar was not born to be the first man into a party.
Yes.
You know, like, he doesn't start the party. He closes her out.
He shuts it down.
Yeah.
You usually see some mixture of Rorik Thars and Sire of Insanities in these Jund Monster lists. It looks like there's no Sires in Jeremy's sideboard. Sire of Insanity is another card that's capable of stealing games against Red White Burn. It's not good all the time, but it definitely has spots of being incredible. the more of a slow controlling kind of play a bunch of removal spells and hit you with Chandra's Phoenix and Storm Breath Dragon type of game plan that David sculpts, the better that is. But if David's just on a straight shock you, lightning strike you, Boros charm you kind of plan, Sire's much worse.
I feel like I've seen a music video about Sire of Insanity recently. The Lil Jon video, Turned Down for What? Have you seen that?
I have not.
I highly recommend it if you're looking for a Sire of Insanity themed music video.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Definitely.
I don't watch as many music videos as I once did, so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, you know, MTV stopped playing them when you and I were like, I don't know,
14
30
or
40.
Not that old, man. Come on. You might be that old.
Turned Down for What? Highly recommended if you're in the market for the craziness. Shoutouts to Little John if you're watching us at home.
Yeah, we're a big fan of your work over here at Star City Games, so.
What?
We appreciate what you do.
Okay. What's David most looking to see in his opening hand? Obviously, Jeremy, the dream is Elvish Mystic into Courser, which he has successfully done already. What is David looking for?
Chandra's Phoenix. To me, that's the most important card in the matchup. It's not really that easy for Jun to answer long term, and they're a little bit soft in the air, and the recurring sources of damage allow you to be a lot more liberal using burn spells to kill opposing creatures. You saw David in that game, he had to kind of fend off Jeremy's creatures with his burn spells, but without a Chandra's Phoenix, without a Boros Reckoner, without a Stormbreath Dragon, he just doesn't have enough resources to win that sort of game. So
yeah, and we saw in game one where he did have the Phoenix was killed several times, and it just kept coming back.
Right.
Yeah, the one Scavenging Ooze, not exactly a lot of answers to the Phoenix.
Right. Temple of Abandon. And a turn one Mountain from David actually might signal that there's something really wrong with his hand, because most of the time these decks lead off with a red-white dual land if they have it available.
Of some sort.
Yeah, you see Boros Guildgate off the top here, so David now has access to white mana, but when they lead off with a turn one Mountain, it actually often indicates there's something really wrong with the hand.
But in this case, there is at least one thing right with the hand, Boros Reckoner, which you correctly anticipated David bringing in.
Here's Domri. This is a really good opening for David to do a lot of damage this turn.
Now, you have to kill the Domri, right?
If his hand's really good, he doesn't have to, but most hands have to kill Domri here.
But either way, he's going to make forward progress, because we're talking about just the Boros Reckoner and a Magma Jet, and while Domri Radi getting 5 life is fantastic, that's what you want to do. You don't want to be getting hit by the Boros Reckoner at all, you know,
right.
Like that's...
So...
Because this is definitely what David wants to do. He wants to get one guy down, get some recurring damage, and not be falling behind on board. And it looks like he's even got, multiple Chain to the Rocks to give him some big plays for the fatties to come, and a Stormbreath Dragon to put Jeremy in a serious bad spot. It looks like our we got the numbers here. It looks like David is actually a 63.5% favorite to win this game.
And it looks like David ignores Domri altogether and simply goes at Jeremy, knocking him down to 17.
That is a show of strength.
Oh yeah.
That is like, let's just make it clear what it's hitting for.
And Jeremy with Xenagos, the Reveler, Palicratos in hand, a lot of power, but again, interesting to see if he's going to have enough time to deploy it.
Boros Reckoner, a card we haven't seen as much of as we were seeing about a year ago. And it's interesting, Bio Blight now being so popular and so good against Boros Reckoner, temporarily hurt Boros Reckoner, but then with the surge of red-green, Boros Reckoner has come back into the spotlight.
So Palicratos the play for Jeremy. And this is the spot I was talking about where Boros Reckoner is really awesome, that if you're trying to use damage-based removal, it's really risky, because David can simply say, all right, you take 5.
Now, we're probably just going to see Chain to the Rocks, right?
Yeah.
But one alternative would be to attack with the Reckoner, First Strike, and Magma Jet.
Oh, wow.
Literally just the Searing Blood.
That is it. So that Searing Blood's going to make sure that the fight actually finishes off Palicratos. And I think David's just trying to figure out where he wants to distribute the damage.
Why not first strike your Boros Reckoner? This is all really weird.
Yeah, we were through a Domri
Oh,
fight.
right.
So we're going to see momentarily what how David is ordering this, but there's a lot of damage he has available to the Searing Blood trigger and the 5 damage from.
That's an extra 6 to the dome.
Yeah. He can choose to kill Domri if he feels like it. He can also just continue ignoring Domri.
Now, are we seeing? It might be that we're clarifying whether or not the Searing Blood was cast before or after the Reckoner. You know, because did he put the Reckoner damage on the stack?
Oh,
and
sure.
Was Searing Blood cast before damage? If it was, we may see Jeremy on 14 or 17 instead of 11, as he should be.
Yep. See Storm Breath Dragon.
Oh, wow.
And again, Jeremy just David rather just ignoring, going straight for Jeremy's throat.
Yeah, so that's 5 damage from the Palacranis redirected to Jeremy, and 3 damage from the Searing Blood. Now we see Storm Breath Dragon putting some serious pressure on Jeremy. What does he need to turn this around? Because he doesn't have a removal spell. What creature could he hope to draw?
A Storm Breath Dragon of his own is not a terrible blocker here, but it's, you know.
At least Scavenging Ooze gains a couple life, I guess.
Yeah, it's tough. It's when the red-white burn deck gets on the front foot, man, it is really tough.
Yep.
It's hard to react with blockers because they have so much removal and so much burn. Once you get in a spot like this, it's often rock in a hard place. So here is Courser from Jeremy. Gains life.
Man, it is tough to.
And David passes the turn, Jeremy rather passes the turn back, and we'll see a Mammoth Jet on the upkeep. And that, combined with the Storm Breath Dragon, should be lethal momentarily. And there it is. David Doberne wins 2 games to 1 over Jeremy Dahlin and moves to 3-0 with red-white burn.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about, like, even though the Jund Monsters deck has so many big creatures, these red-white burn decks hit at the right time. They're lean, they're efficient enough. As long as they can get one recurring source of damage down, they have an edge against these kinds of decks.
Yeah, this is that game is a great showcase of that too, because Jeremy won. When Jeremy lost the game, he had Xenagos the Reveler, he had Scavenging Goose, he had resources to work with.
Oh yeah,
and just not enough
time.
Yeah, and you know, Courser and Scavenging Goose, he had 2 sources of life gain. You know, Xenagos is a reasonable long-term threat, generating a lot of tokens, but just not enough time. And
it was actually even the other Xenagos, God of Revels,
right,
hitting real hard.
Right.
But without the time to actually take advantage of it, he ends up just folding with a fistful of cards that he never had time to play.
And that game is also a really good highlight of the fact that, you know, when you have decks like Red, White, Burn, the instinct is, you know, I'm going to add, you know, a bunch of Chain of the Rocks. I'm going to play a bunch of Mizzium Mortars and maybe Anger the Gods too. And I'm going to have all this removal, and I'm going to kill all their guys and make sure that they can never, you know, start threatening me at all. But against these decks like Jund Monsters and Green Red Monsters, because they have card advantage in Domri, because their threats are so impactful, because they have additional sources of card advantage like Courser and all that stuff, you can't really win a controlling game. Even though you have a lot of removal available to you,